The Blight King unwrapped his arms and walked toward James. This is a military region. You shouldn't come here so often. Scrap that. You shouldn't come here at all. He was implying that he did not want to see James, as James often brought trouble along. The Blight King then got onto a military vehicle and left, leaving behind an astonished Zara. It took Zara some time to process the situation. When the realization hit, she kept gasping for air. She hurriedly made her way to James and snatched her phone from him. Let me see. Let me see. She opened the album and saw the photo. In it, the Blight King had his hands around her shoulders. He wore a compassionate look, almost looking like a loving father. Ah! Zara cried. She bawled her eyes out. After all these years, her wish had finally come true. There stood the Blight King, commander of the western border and one of the 5 commanders. She crouched down and cried. They were tears of joy. James frowned. It was just a photograph. Did she have to be so dramatic? All right, now, we're in a military region. We better leave, or someone might make us. Ads by Pub Future. Upon hearing this, Zara wiped the tears off the corners of her eyes and got into the car. James then drove off. On the way home, looking at her photo with the Blight King, seeing how he had his hands around her shoulders, and watching the compassionate look on his face, Zara almost burst into tears again. After some time, she turned and faced James. James, thank you. I truly believe you're the Black Dragon now. Only someone with a comparable rank to the Blight King could make this happen. TSK, Black Dragon. You have a wild imagination. James pouted. Zara asked, weren't you the one who said you were the real deal? Besides, if you aren't the Black Dragon, why did the Blight King welcome us upon our arrival? And why would he agree to take a picture with me? James replied, I've told you we were just trying our luck. Just because the Blight King agreed to take a photo with you, I'm suddenly the Black Dragon. He was just being nice. What does that have to do with me? That's true. Zara, pensive, nodded in agreement. His words made sense. Besides, there was no way James could be the Black Dragon. If he was the Black Dragon, why would he marry into the Callahans? How could he tolerate being ordered around by them? Perhaps it was as he said. The Blight King was an amiable man. He would not refuse a military fan's favor to take a photo. Ads by Pub Future. Hey, don't tell Thea about this. And don't say a word to anyone else, James reminded her. Okay, Zara nodded. Wait, something's not right. Something came to Zara's mind, something that happened during the Blight King's succession ceremony. During then, although rumored to have borrowed the vehicle, James had been driving around freely in the military region. However, after today's meeting with Daniel and the photograph incident with the Blight King, things seemed a little. Zara glanced at James. James, you're no ordinary man. Be honest with me. Who are you? Don't worry. I won't tell Thea, and I won't spread gossip to anyone else. Who am I? I'm just a decommissioned military man, James said, smiling. Something's off. Zara was deep in thought. Although she had not been in Kensington, she had heard of the events that had occurred, especially those concerning Thea Callahan. Just yesterday, she had even heard about a group of men kneeling before Thea and begging for her forgiveness. Rumor has it that it was concerning the ghost masked man who had been executed by the Blight King, the man Thea Callahan had saved 10 years ago. When he was still alive, the ghost masked man had sought those men out and had them promise to take care of Thea. In Zara's mind, it could not have been so simple. Was it because of James? She muttered silently. The more she contemplated, the likelier it seemed to be. With that in mind, she asked with gleaming eyes, James, don't worry. I won't tell anyone about your true identity. James rolled his eyes. What identity? Zara said, smiling. You came from the southern plains, so you've got to be a general too. James, if you ever get the chance to, you have to introduce me to the Black Dragon. Zara was firm in her belief. James had to be the general of the southern plains. James just laughed and remained silent. They reached Thea's place soon after. Gladys and her family had left early in the morning to settle their car insurance and other household affairs. It had been a while since they had returned home. Thea and Una had also just returned from shopping at the Trade City Center. By the time James arrived, it was almost 1 o'clock. Gladys scolded him as he walked through the door. How long does it take to pick up a single person? Look at the time. What are you waiting for? Get to cooking. Ever since James married into the Callahans, Gladys stopped cooking. By now, they had all grown lazy. No one even bothered to prepare lunch. None of them had eaten anything. James carried the suitcase in and put it aside. Upon hearing Gladys' words, he nodded. I'll get to it right now. Right away, he headed to the kitchen. Zara. Gladys greeted her warmly. As Zara watched James enter the kitchen, her eyebrows furrowed. She had been watching his every move. When he got into a dispute outside the airport, he resorted to solving the problem with his fists. Then, he had lunch with General Highsmith. Ads by Pub Future. Moreover, before this, he had brought her to the military region to take a picture with the Blythe King. How could he merely be an ordinary man? However, now that he was at the Callahan residence, why did he seem like a completely different person? She scanned the members of the Callahan family. She greeted, hello. Finally, her gaze fell on Thea. She could not believe her eyes. Thea, is that you? Zara, it's been a while, Thea greeted her warmly. Zara stared at Thea. She had heard that Thea had restored her looks and was now a beauty. However, she did not expect her to be this gorgeous. Zara almost felt jealous of her. Her figure and her face were truly. Thea, was it James who fixed you up? Zara asked with an astonished look. Yes, Thea said, smiling. Don't just stand here. Come and sit. Zara took a deep breath. Is James that impressive? Ads by Pub Future. Gladys immediately dismissed the idea. He just has some medicinal knowledge. He's not worthy of Thea at all. I'm still thinking of ways to get Thea to divorce him. With her charms, she can totally find herself a better man. That's right. Zara clapped in agreement. You're right, Gladys. James is unworthy of her. We should separate them as soon as possible. Once he's divorced, I'll finally have my shot, she added in her mind. He was an awe-inspiring man with medicinal knowledge. How was she going to find another man like this? Mom. Thea had a disgruntled look. She glanced at Zara. Zara, why are you encouraging her? Zara said, smiling, Thea, you are a beautiful woman. I don't think a man like James who married into the family is worthy of you. David chimed in, she's right, Thea. You shouldn't stop at James. Aren't you getting along well with Ems Lawson of Longevity Pharmaceuticals? Have her introduce a rich guy to you. That way, I can get something out of your relationship too. Thea's family banded together and tried to convince her to divorce James. Meanwhile, James was in the kitchen. At the same time, in the Callahans' villa, Lex summoned his family once more. He had yet to return to his senses after yesterday's event. Those men kneeled before Thea and asked for her forgiveness. The image of that was too shocking for him. Even if the likes of Alex, Brian, and Jay had apologized to her because they owed someone else a favor, it was still a form of social networking. We have to bring Thea back. Lex gave the final order. Howard said, Father, it's not like we didn't try. Thea and her family just aren't interested. Even if we were to give them 20% of the shares, they wouldn't be coming back. Lex sat on the sofa and smoked his cigarettes. He opened his eyes. Howard, do you know what my dream is? Howard replied, Father, your dream is to make the Callahans a powerful and influential family. That's right. Lex nodded. Even if those men only helped Thea because they owed someone else a favor, they're still part of her network connections. If we establish a good relationship with those men, it will surely benefit us. Do you know how much the Callahans have earned by cooperating with Celestial Group? At least tens of millions. Lex took a drag on his cigarette. Once Thea returns, we'll be able to expand our production. We can further cooperate with large pharmaceutical groups such as Celestial Group and Longevity Pharmaceuticals and establish ourselves in Kensington's commercial city. With this, the Callahans will surely rise. Lex grew increasingly excited as he spoke. Bring Thea to me, no matter the cost. The Callahans all had grim faces. They did not want Thea back. Although with her, they had managed to establish stronger connections with Celestial Group, she would take the helm of the Callahans once she came back. That meant things might go against their interests. It was a gateway for the Callahans to get richer, but what use was there being an influential family if they themselves could not gain anything from it? Grandfather, Tommy spoke. Thea's not coming back. I knelt before her last time. Gladys was even more ruthless. She claimed that they would not return even if you personally went and kneeled before her. Megan chimed in, "That's right, Grandpa. They're truly despicable. All these years, they've lived off the Clahan's resources. However, they're showing their true colors now that they're asked to contribute to the family. I'll pay them a visit once more." Lex stood up. "Prepare the gifts." Howard reluctantly complied. Following that, Lex brought Howard's family and headed to Thea's residence. John and his family did not reside in the Callahan residence. Instead, they had gotten a small villa nearby. After preparing lunch, James sat on the balcony and smoked his cigarettes. Zara had skipped her lunch. Ads by Pub Future. She headed toward the balcony and saw James smoking his cigarettes. With a zipped smile, she spoke, "James, you don't have any influence among the Callahans. Why don't you divorce Thea?" James glanced at her. Zara blinked her big, round eyes. "Why don't we get married after you get your divorce?" James smiled at her and said nothing. At that moment, the doorbell rang. David put down his cutlery and answered the door. The moment he saw Lex, he froze. He hurriedly asked, "Grandfather, why are you here?" Please, come in." David invited them into the house. "Mother, Father, Uncle Howard and Grandpa are here." Gladys put down her cutlery, her expression grim. Lex made his way in with a smile on his aged face. "Thea, Grandpa's here to see you." Thea hurriedly stood and greeted him. "Grandpa, please sit. Have you eaten? Let me grab you a plate." Lex laughed. "I've already eaten, Thea. It's been a while. I hope you're no longer angry. Come home with me. You'll be the chairman of Eternality." "No way," Gladys instantly retorted. "Father, stop wasting your time. Thea won't ever go back. We won't consider your offer unless you're willing to transfer 50% of the group's shares to Benjamin." "What?" Tommy panicked and raised his voice. 50% of the shares. The audacity. Ads by Pub Future. Howard's expression was grim. "I'm warning you. Don't cross the line." Howard's wife, Jolie, was anxious too. She hurriedly joined in. "Father, don't promise them anything." Lex waved them off and cut the conversation short. He thought for a while before asking, "Thea, if I give your family 50% of the shares, can you bring glory to the Callahans? Can you turn the Callahans into a powerful and influential family?" Thea was at a loss. She never expected Grandpa to agree to transfer 50% of the shares to them. Bringing glory to the Callahans. Becoming an influential family. Was she capable of doing that? She did not believe so. Gladys, too, did not expect Lex to consider her demands. She immediately added, "Well, of course. Do you know what influential people Thea has acquainted herself with? This morning, she even went shopping in the commercial city with Ems Lawson of Longevity Pharmaceuticals." Upon saying that, she shot Thea a look. "Thea, tell us you can bring glory to the Callahans." Thea could not continue. She was not confident. She would be fine managing Eternality Group, but was she truly capable of leading the Callahans on the path to glory? "She will." James, who had just finished his cigarette, approached them and said with a smile, "Grandpa, don't you worry. Thea will surely lead the Callahans on the path to glory. The Xaviers of the Great Four have fallen. The remaining three are not too far away. Not long, the Callahans would make their way up and become one of the Great Four." James' words were met with discontent from the Callahans. Tommy yelled at him, "Who do you think you are, meddling in the affairs of the Callahans?" Megan recalled how James humiliated her in front of everyone and how she was forced to kneel at Una's banquet yesterday. Upset, she berated him sarcastically, "The remaining three are falling soon. Who do you think you are? Alex Yates. Do you get to decide their fates?" Gladys, too, reprimanded him, "What an embarrassment. Can't you just keep your mouth shut?" Thea shot James a disgruntled look, insinuating that he should have kept his thoughts to himself. She did not feel confident in leading the Callahans to glory. Becoming an influential family required not just wealth but also strong connections. Lex completely ignored James and fixed his gaze on Thea. "Thea, listen. I'll give you 3 years. If you can transform us into an influential family and grow our assets by a dozen times within that time, I'll give you 50% of the group's shares. And I promise you'll remain the executive chairman of the Clahan's family business." Thea was intimidated. How would she be able to grow the family's assets by that much in 3 years? She was not omnipotent. Gladys shot her a look. Why hesitate? The look implied, accept his offer and acquire the shares. Thea glanced at her family. Gladys, Benjamin, David, and Alyssa looked at her in anticipation. Ads by Pub Future. She contemplated for a while. Grandpa, I'm not making any promises. However, if I'm in charge of the Clahans family business, I'll do my best to bring glory to the family. I'll work hard for us to become an influential and powerful family. Lex was relieved upon hearing this. Thea's connections were extraordinary. If Thea wholeheartedly devoted herself to the Clahans, cause, it was likely the family's status would grow. Lex stood up. A deal's a deal. Thea, come to the Callahan residence for the negotiations on the redistribution of shares. Don't worry, I won't go back on my word. Thank you, Grandpa, for having faith in me. Thea stood with a look of gratitude on her face. We'll take our leave. Lex turned to leave. Howard and the others followed close behind. Their expressions were grim. After they left, David jumped with excitement. Yes, 50% of the shares would mean we're in control of half of the Callahans. Thea, you've made us proud. Benjamin, meanwhile, was a little disoriented. All these years, Lex had not been treating him well. He received none of the group's shares. All of a sudden, they now had 50% in their possession. It felt surreal. Gladys glanced at James. It was his idea. Ads by Pub Future. She had incidentally brought it up. She never expected Lex to consent. He's not entirely useless. Gladys pursed her lips. However, Thea wore an anxious expression. It's too early to celebrate. He'll still take the shares back if I have nothing to show for after becoming the executive chairman. David dismissed her worries. Thea, business is booming now that Eternality has established a permanent partnership agreement with Celestial Group. What are you afraid of? Besides, with how close you are to Ems Lawson, wouldn't it be a piece of cake to conduct business with Longevity Pharmaceuticals? Thea was deep in thought. That's true. At that moment, the insecure expression on her face changed into one of anticipation. Had the time finally arrived for her to apply what she had learned? She was looking forward to it. She looked forward to seizing the reins of the Callahans, entering the corporate world, and doing great things. She would bring glory to the Callahans, and they would truly become a powerful family. Watching the emboldened look on her face, James smiled. With him manipulating in the shadows, Thea's business career would be smooth sailing. Not before long, her name would be known by all. Due to the redistribution of the family business shares, Thea's family was thrilled. However, the opposite was true for Howard and John's families. They were displeased. The majority of the Clahans' shares were in Lex's hands. The redistribution of shares would cause the number of shares in their possessions to shrink. There was no guarantee they would even receive any. Soon, night fell. Wearing a glamorous dress and surrounded by her family, Thea entered the Clahans' villa. The living room was already teeming with people. Howard's family and John's family were there. 3 generations of the Callahans were now present. Lex stood up and invited Thea to sit. The more amicable Lex was toward Thea, the more threatened the rest of the Callahans felt. Lex was old and would probably not live for much longer. They believed this redistribution of shares was equivalent to him dividing up the Clahans' inheritance. As there were limited seats, the non-core members of the family stood during the discussion. James was standing too, but he could not care less. Lex was seated above. He scanned the group before he spoke. I summon all of you here today for 2 things. First, from today onward, Thea will formally take over the reins of the Callahans and will be in charge of every family business as the executive chairman. Second, we'll be discussing the redistribution of shares. Upon hearing this, everyone held their breath. All eyes were fixed on Lex, waiting for his next move. Lex glanced at Benjamin. All these years, Benjamin has been working diligently. And though he received no shares, he did not complain. I declare that Benjamin will be given 50% of the family's shares. This will not be limited to Eternality Group, but rather all Callahan businesses. Upon hearing the announcement, everyone could not help but glance at Benjamin. Their eyes burned with hatred. What did he do to deserve all those shares? Howard and John dared not object to their father's decision. Meanwhile, John's son, Weston, stepped forward. Grandpa, I object to this. Based on what you said, Benjamin gets to have a 50% stake in my processing plant. Lex opened his eyes and glanced at Weston. Do I have to repeat myself? I did say all businesses under the Callahans, didn't I? Are you a Callahan? Ads by Pub Future. Weston nodded. Yes, since you are a Callahan, your processing plant belongs to the Callahans. Grandpa, Weston, enraged, raised his voice. I established the processing plant myself. Although it's modest in size, it has nothing to do with the Callahans family business. Why does Benjamin get to have a 50% stake in it? Lex's face darkened. With a howl of rage, he smashed the table. That's because you used the Callahans' money to establish it. And don't forget about the business deals you made through the Callahans' connections. Weston was at a loss for words. Unable to refute Lex's claims, he angrily seated himself. Benjamin, on the other hand, was flattered. It was surprising. He received not just 50% of Eternality Group but 50% of everything the Callahans owned. Lex took a deep breath. I'm old. I can no longer lead the Callahans. That's why I'm leaving it to our distinguished youngsters. I know you're dissatisfied with my decision. How about this? We'll give Thea a 3-month probation period. If she succeeds in multiplying the family's assets, she'll be eligible to be the chairman. Only then will her family be entitled to the 50% stake. Lex glanced at the Callahans in the foyer and continued. From today onward, both Howard and John will hold 20% of the family's shares. I will hold the remaining 10% for the time being. You have the right to distribute your shares among your children. Any objections? Lex scanned the group. This is a family meeting. If you have any objections, speak up. Otherwise, I hope you'll work together and bring the Callahans to greater heights. Initially, Howard and John were discontented. However, after Lex explained the redistribution of the shares, they no longer had a problem. 20% was much more than what they had both received previously. Ads by Pub Future. Seeing that they remained silent, Lex continued, since no one is objecting to this, it's a deal. Thea will be the executive chairman. Howard will be the vice chairman. Howard, you'll assist Thea in her work and help bring glory to the Callahans. Understood. Howard complied. Tommy, on the other hand, did not. Grandpa, we respect your decision. However, since Thea's appointed as the executive chairman, she should be doing something for the family. Say, the Trade City Center business. Everyone has been setting up their businesses there. We can't miss out. Since Thea's the executive chairman, we should leave the matter in her hands. Let her lead the negotiations for us to set up our business there. We'll recognize her as the leader of the Callahans only if she succeeds. That's right. I agree. Let Thea lead the negotiations. I heard we needed assets amounting to over 5 billion to set up there. Also, there would be an annual fee of 100 million that has to be paid in a lump sum. We should be able to gather 100 million. However, setting up a business there in itself is no simple matter. If Thea succeeds in her negotiations, we'll acknowledge her. Following Tommy's suggestions, everyone shared their thoughts. Upon hearing this, Lex glanced at Thea. Quote. Thea was unsure of herself and was reluctant to commit. She had gone there with Una today. Even Una was paying her respects to the person in charge of the Trade City Center. James stood. Don't worry. Thea's got this. If she can't even obtain the right for the Callahans to set up their shop, she's unqualified to be the chairman. Upon hearing this, Thea shot him a disgruntled look. It implied that he had talked too much and stirred trouble for her. Meanwhile, Tommy looked as if his evil machinations had come to a crescendo. Obtain the right to set up a shop. How was that possible? The Trade Center had reiterated that one needed assets totaling at least 5 billion to be eligible. All the Callahans had amounted to only 1.5 billion. They were far from getting a spot. Slap. Gladys smacked James on the head. Watch your tongue. What makes you think you have the right to speak at the family meeting? She reprimanded him. All right, that settles it. Lex laughed heartily. To set the Callahans up at the Trade City Center was something unthinkable to him. That place was the future Glochibal Financial Center. As such, businesses from Kensington were not the only ones seeking to establish themselves there. All large corporations nationwide would eventually make their way there. If the Callahans managed to set up shop there, it would be a symbol of prestige. Lex could not care less about the 100 million entrance fee. Grandpa, Thea was hesitant. However, seeing Lex's delighted face, she did not want to disappoint him. She hung her head. I'll try. Chairman, you now carry the hopes and dreams of the Callahans. You have to get us the right to set up shop. Worry not, Chairman. As long as you succeed in your negotiations, we'll find a way to get money, no matter the rental cost. That's right. But if you fail, that'll mean you are unqualified to be the chairman. The Callahans chitter-chatted. Ads by Pub Future. Though they seemed to be currying favor, they were actually ridiculing her. Thea knew they wanted to see her make a fool out of herself. Haha, we'll join our efforts and bring the Callahans to greater heights. Dismissed. Lex stood up and headed upstairs, laughing heartily. Thea stood and glared at James. James, are you just looking for trouble? David exclaimed, wearing a murderous look on his face. Tommy let loose a laugh. Good luck, Thea. It isn't easy to start a business at the Trade City Center. I'm afraid being the chairman isn't exactly all fun and games. Thea, I heard that even someone like Alex Yates has to play nice during the process. I'm afraid he can't help you out this time around. Haha, we'll await the good news. The Callahans babbled non-stop. Meanwhile, Thea left the Callahans' villa in a foul mood. James followed close behind. Along the way, Gladys, David, and Alyssa ranted about James. Ads by Pub Future. James, I'm warning you. Keep your mouth shut at the next family meeting. Stop embarrassing us, Gladys scolded. David joined in, useless piece of trash. Do you even know what the Trade City Center is? You need an entrance fee of at least a couple of million to open a restaurant at Food Street. The same goes for the Fashion Street. The prices will be exorbitant if a company sets up shop there. No matter how they chastised him, James remained silent. Thea looked at him, disgruntled. You've made life difficult for me. Do you know owner of Longevity Pharmaceuticals had to go through an afternoon's worth of paperwork to set up shop there? And she's the chairman of a $100 billion corporation. What am I going to do? Will I even make it past the front gate? James smiled and said, Honey, I have faith in you. You can do this. But I don't have faith in myself. Thea was dismayed. They continued to bicker along the way home. Zara stayed home and did not go to the Callahans' villa. Seeing the expressions on their faces upon their return, she asked, Why the long faces? Did you guys not get the shares? James, that piece of trash talked too much and got Thea into a difficult situation, Gladys criticized. Zara glanced at James. What happened? She asked. Gladys filled her in. Hearing this, Zara wore a thoughtful expression on her face. Thea might be able to do this. James nodded. Yes, I have faith in her. Besides, even if I had kept my mouth shut, do you think the other Callahans would allow her to hold on to her executive director's position? If Thea wishes to secure her authority, she needs to win them over fair and square. Good thinking. Did you think we weren't aware of that? Do you take us for fools? Gladys chided. We could have shirked our responsibility on that impossible task. Now, thanks to you, how is she supposed to obtain the right to set up shop? James raised his hands. How am I supposed to know that? I'm not an expert in this field. Thea sighed. All right, stop bickering already. Jamie was just being considerate. I'll make the relevant preparations. I'll go to the office tomorrow to prepare the related documents and hand them in for submission. If it doesn't work, then so be it. Grandpa should know that this is an impossible mission. So, even if I fail, he won't make life difficult for me. Yeah, Gladys nodded. At this point, that was the only thing they could do. Meanwhile, Benjamin was still in a trance. 50% shares. He never expected in his wildest dreams to be granted 50% of the family's shares. David, too, had forgotten about his earlier dejection. He exclaimed excitedly, Father, Grandpa said you have the right to redistribute your shares. I'm your only son. Quick, give me 25%. Benjamin glanced at Gladys. Even though he had the right to redistribute them, Gladys had the final say. Gladys smacked David on the head and said, Thea still has to undergo a 3-month probation period before she becomes the official chairman, yet here you are thinking about dividends. At least wait till she's secured her position. Mom, we can still get a lot in 3 months. Have Dad give me my shares first. I'll use the money from the next 3 months to buy a villa for my in-laws. Upon hearing this, Alyssa was delighted. Thanks, darling, adds by Pub Future. Gladys glanced at James and said, look at him. What a considerate son-in-law. He thinks of his in-laws when he gets rich. What about you? James scratched his nose. Was he not thinking for the Callahans? If he was not, how did Thea become the chairman? Would Benjamin have gotten the 50% shares? David immediately understood the situation and spoke, Mom, it's not that I wasn't thinking about you. However, now that Dad has gotten his shares, you'd be able to afford a villa in just a few months. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law's family is cramped in a small 100-square-meter house. It's all right. Gladys waved him off. I'm not mad. Since the Myers have entrusted their daughter to you, you should help them out now that we are rich. Alyssa was grateful. Thank you, Mom. They were filled with joy. However, Thea wore a worried expression. She returned to her room, switched on her laptop, and started writing the application to set up shop. James had not smoked in front of Thea for the entire day. Now, his tobacco addiction was kicking in again. Ads by Pub Future. He dared not smoke on the balcony again. Instead, he made his way out of the house, seated himself by the stairs, and lit a cigarette. Zara approached him. Wrapping her arms around herself, she fixed her gaze on James, who was sitting on the floor while smoking his cigarette. She pursed her lips. James, it should be a piece of cake for Thea to set up shop at the Trade City Center, right? James lifted his head and caught a glimpse of a delicate face. He shrugged. How would I know? What? Aren't you helping out in the shadows? With your help, it should be a piece of cake, no. You flatter me. I'm just a decommissioned military guy. Unconcerned for her comportment, Zara sat on the floor and wrapped her arms around James. She looked as if she was clinging to him. She laughed flirtatiously. James, I came to Kensington looking for a job. You got anything for me? Thea did not know how to write the application for setting up a shop. She excited her room but could not find James anywhere. She made her way out of the house. She made it a few steps before she saw James seated on the floor by the stairs not too far away. Zara had her arms wrapped around him. It seemed as if she was clinging to him. Rumble. It was as if a thunderous storm had descended upon her. Thea was flabbergasted, petrified. Her eyes brimmed with tears. She stood there for a few seconds before covering her mouth and running back inside, weeping. Zara was daring. She was almost on top of James. A young maiden's alluring fragrance entered James' nostrils, and he hurriedly turned his body to the side. His actions amused Zara, and she burst out laughing. James, are you still shy about this? People say you haven't been doing it with Thea. Could it be you're still a virgin? James blushed. Indeed, he was. 10 years ago, he was only 17, a teenage boy who had just graduated senior high school. He had been in a relationship with a girl back then. However, holding hands was the furthest they went. He was then in the army for 10 years. His days were filled with special training, ice-cold weapons, and the remains of his enemies. He did not wish to prolong this conversation. He inhaled the smoke deeply, threw the cigarette butt into the trash can, and made his way back into the house. Thea, who had seen James by the stairs with Zara's arms wrapped around him, ran away in tears. The moment she entered her room, she burst out crying. She had thought that James was a good man. To think he would be identical to all the other men out there. Ads by Pub Future. He had only met Zara today, yet the two were already hooking up. Knock, knock, knock. Knocks sounded from the other side of the door. Thea hurriedly wiped her tears and took a deep breath to calm herself down. Then, she went for the door. James walked in and asked, smiling, "What are you doing? You are taking quite some time." However, Thea said nothing. She headed straight toward the laptop, sat in front of it, and stared at the screen. James did not notice anything out of the ordinary. He consciously took a mat out and placed it on the floor. Thea felt aggrieved watching his actions. He might be playing the gentleman in her presence, but he was hooking up with another woman behind her back. Worse still, that woman was her cousin. She shook her head, trying to shake the messed up thoughts off her mind. However, she could not forget the image of Zara clinging on to James flirtatiously with her body on top of him. The scene was etched in her mind. It lingered no matter how much she tried to forget it. Ads by Pub Future. Did he hook up with someone else because I didn't let him have his way with me? He's a man, after all. He has his needs. Thea was deep in thought. She thought it was her fault James went looking for another woman. However, deep inside, she felt bitter. It was not as if she forbade him from having his way with her. He voluntarily slept on the floor. She had hinted at him multiple times, but he was unresponsive. As she thought about this, bitterness filled her heart. At that moment, she thought about divorcing him. She would divorce him and wish him the best with Zara. James. James, lying on the mat and deep in his thoughts, recollected himself and asked, "What is it?" Thea turned to face James, who was now sitting, with a grim expression. "What do you think of my cousin, Zara?" James was confused. He could not read between the lines. He was in the army for 10 years. For the past 10 years, he had been interacting with his enemies, not women. As such, he was unable to read their minds. He instinctively nodded. "She's cool." Upon hearing this, Thea was disappointed. She wanted to save their marriage. She could still remember James bringing her to the House of Royals and the way he meticulously took care of her after marrying into the Callahans. He would put her to bed at night and bring her out to sunbathe during the day. She had never experienced such care and warmth. At that point, she had already fallen in love with James. She had decided that he would be the only man in her life. She never expected him to fool around with another woman so soon, not to mention the woman was her cousin. She wanted to ask for a divorce, but the words were stuck in her throat. "Darling, what are you trying to say?" "And nothing." Thea could not bring herself to say those words. She was no longer motivated to write the application for setting up a shop, so she got on the bed and slept. The night passed silently. The next day, after changing into professional business attire, Thea set out for Eternality Group early in the morning. James had nothing planned, so he slept in until 10 o'clock in the morning. A lot had happened in Kensington lately. Ads by Pub Future. Warren Xavier, the late head of the Xaviers and one of the Great Four, had died. The downfall of the Xaviers came, and they fell from grace. The heads of the Frasers, the Wilsons, and the Zimmermans were all dead. The succession of the Blythe King followed suit. Next, a mysterious tycoon bought the Trade City Center. Just as people were in a heated discussion, the Callahans dropped a bombshell today. Though the Callahans were a second-rate family, they had been stealing the limelight recently. The first time was when Thea had called Alex Yates, which brought about the bankruptcy of the Xaviers. The second time was when Lex forged an invitation letter to the Blythe King's succession ceremony. Moreover, just this morning, at Eternality Group of the Callahans, Lex Callahan personally showed up to a press conference. He declared Thea Callahan to be the official executive chairman of the group and that she would hold 50% of the family's shares. At the press conference, Lex emphasized furthering the cooperation between Eternality and Celestial Group and brought up the relationship between Thea and Ems Lawson of Longevity Pharmaceuticals. He even described the image of the powerful men kneeling before Thea at Una's birthday banquet. With the holding of the press conference, the Callahans have once again appeared before the masses. Following that, Lex extended an invitation to all people from all walks of life to his 80th birthday banquet, which would be held at Kensington Hotel in 2 days. For a moment, the Callahans were the talk of the street. Ads by Pub Future. People talked about how Thea was now the leader of the Callahans. With her connections, the rise of the Callahans was now within sight. Thea was famous once more. James, as husband of Thea, naturally became a topic of discussion as well. He was branded as an incompetent husband and a useless man. Upon waking up, James got out of bed, tidied up the mat, and walked out of the room. Having received their shares yesterday, the family had gone out for a celebration. Only Zara remained. She was on the sofa scrolling through her phone, looking for job openings on company websites. She had wanted to work in Eternality. However, she felt uncomfortable working in her relative's company. Upon seeing James walking out of the room, she put her phone down immediately. "James, Come and help me find a job. As Thea was not around, James casually lit a cigarette. He headed towards Zara and sat on the sofa. Glancing at her, he said coolly, "Go to a job fair if you are looking for a job. Why are you asking me for help?" She took a seat beside James and hugged his arm, playing a coquette. "You are influential, after all. I would be able to find a decent job if you helped me out." The two were so close that their bodies seemed to mash together. Zara's chest was protruding out, and she was deliberately rubbing her breasts against James' body. Unable to withstand her flirting, James moved to leave. Just then, the door opened. David and Alyssa walked in. Upon seeing the scene on the sofa, they were stunned. David and Alyssa just came back after taking a drive in their brand new Maserati. The moment they entered the house, they saw everything: Zara hugging James' arm as she clung to him intimately. What? David exclaimed. He walked toward them and said to James, "How dare you, James? You've been leeching off the Callahans for some time now. Now that Thea isn't home, you are fooling around with another woman. And you, Zara. How could you do such a thing? He's your cousin-in-law." Zara was just playing around with James. She did not expect David to return so soon. With her cheeks reddened, she immediately released James and hung her head. David, it's not what you think it is." "What is it then?" David raised his voice. "What were you two doing? If we hadn't come home in time, the two of you would have been naked on the sofa by now." James, too, did not expect things to turn out like this. However, he did not explain anything. Alyssa sat on the sofa. With a surly expression, she scolded, "Zara, how shameless of you. You carried yourself with such poise. I thought you were a girl with a sense of self-worth. But to think you would go after your cousin-in-law to satisfy your lust. Also, you sure have an interesting taste in men. James, of all people." Aye. Zara opened her mouth but was at a loss for words. She looked at James pleadingly. "James, explain what happened to them." Ads by Pub Future. James calmly said, "The truth will speak for itself." "James, you're dead meat. I'm telling Thea about this. There's no doubt she'll divorce you." David spat menacingly. He had hated James. His words at the family meeting had invited trouble for Thea. It would be a loss for the family if Lex took the family shares back due to this. James wore an indifferent look. Thea was unlike them. She knew their boundaries. She would be the judge. "I'm going grocery shopping." Seeing the time, James stood up and walked out of the house. After he had left, Zara tried explaining herself once more. However, David and Alyssa were disinterested. There was nothing Zara could do. Well, so be it. So what if they told Thea about this? Ads by Pub Future. She had wanted James to divorce Thea so she could openly go after him anyway. Thea was at the company the whole day. She first attended the press conference. Then, she familiarized herself with the company's business after officially taking over as the chairman. Later, she prepared the documents for the application to set up shop at the Trade City Center. She was so occupied with work that she had forgotten what she had witnessed last night. She only reached home at 8 o'clock. By the time she came home, she was exhausted. She planned to rest after washing up. However, upon noticing that everyone was wearing a surly expression, she asked, "What's wrong?" Gladys looked at James and answered coldly, "Ask him what he's done." David had told Gladys about the affair between James and Zara. Gladys had wanted Thea to divorce James. However, she never expected Zara to be the fuse. Zara was her brother's daughter. She was part of the Hill family. What misfortune. Thea glanced at James. David stood up and said, "Thea, when I came home this morning, I saw James making out with Zara on the sofa. They were hugging, and their clothes were almost off." David exaggerated greatly. "David, don't spout nonsense." Zara was enraged. She was only hugging his arm. What did he mean by making out? Thea's face darkened. She had seen everything last night. She never expected them to be so audacious as to make out in the house. With a grim expression, she took a seat. James noticed the displeasure on Thea's face and hurriedly explained, "Thea, don't listen to David. Nothing's going on between us. Yes, she was holding my arm, but she was only asking me to find her a job. We weren't making out." "Yes," Zara hurriedly added. That's what really happened, Tia. David sprang to his feet. Looking for a job. Who do you think you are? The chairman of the company. Tia is the chairman of Eternality. Zara should be approaching her for help, not you. Gladys was sullen. Zara, I won't be telling your father about this. It'd be bad if rumors were to spread and ruin the good name of the Hills. James, you have to divorce Tia. The Callahans could never accept such a shameless son-in-law like you. That's right. Get a divorce. Alyssa joined in. Tia felt her head spin. A divorce. She had wanted to say those words last night. However, she had recalled how well James had treated her. She remembered James' meticulous care and sincere thoughtfulness. She wanted to give him a chance. All men made mistakes. If he turned over a new leaf, she would forgive him. However, she never expected James to do something as outrageous as making out with Zara in their house. If David had not gotten back in time. Ads by Pub Future. Tia could not hold back her tears. She looked James in the eye, eyes full of tears. Tia's tearful expression on her face tugged at James' heartstrings. He hurriedly asked, Tia, do you not trust me? Tia wept. I trust you, James. But I trust what I've seen more. I saw everything last night. I saw how intimate you two were by the stairs and how you embraced each other. All men make mistakes, so I wanted to give you a chance. But, this is how you repay me. This is my home. How could you make out with another woman in my home? Tia wailed, unable to suppress her emotions. Last night, James remembered. Zara was hugging his arm last night. It turned out Tia had witnessed everything. No wonder she looked as if there was something on her mind. However, he was innocent. Divorce. You have to divorce him. This trash has been leeching off our family. To think he would even make out with another woman behind my sister's back. Besides, how could you be this shameless, Zara? Tia's your cousin. The Callahans started attacking the pair. Zara was so aggrieved she was almost in tears. Ads by Pub Future. She was at fault. However, she was just holding James by the arm. How did things turn out this way? Being chastised as a shameless woman, she could no longer hold back her tears. She cried out, yes, I am shameless. So what? James is a fine man. Yet, your people order him around like a servant. After he gets this divorce, I am marrying him. Smack. Gladys slapped her across the face. How could you be so brazen? How unfortunate of the Hills to have someone like you. A mark surfaced on Zara's fair cheeks. Aggrieved, she wept. Fine. I wish you two the best. Tia's voice broke. James, I'll see you at the Department of Civil Affairs tomorrow morning. Upon saying that, she ran into her room in tears and slammed the door shut. James massaged his temple with a frustrated look on his face. What was happening? He had never felt this troubled even back when he had to face an army. However, he was back here to repay his debts. There was no need for him to marry Tia and make her his. James would do anything to make Tia happy. However, she was angry now. He could not explain things but could only wait for her anger to dissipate. Scram. Gladys pointed at the door. Get lost, the both of you. The Callahans do not welcome you. David, throw Zara's suitcase out. Yes, Mom. David made his way into Zara's room, took her suitcase and a few pieces of clothing, and tossed everything out. The Callahans were determined to kick James and Zara out. Gladys even showed them to the door with a broom. Outside the door, Zara cried her eyes out upon seeing the pieces of clothing on the floor. She looked at James apologetically. James, I'm sorry. It's all my fault. James waved her off. It was a trivial matter, and he did not take it to heart. All right now, stop blaming yourself. It's not entirely your fault. The Callahans have long had a problem with me. They've been trying to convince Tia to divorce me for a while now. Tia used to stand up for me, but now that something like this has happened, getting a divorce should be on the table. Although it was not too serious of a problem, it certainly did complicate things a little. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. If you two divorce, I'm all yours. James glanced at her. Give it up. I only have Tia in my heart. James knew Zara only spoke these words because she thought he was a big shot after yesterday's event. I'm serious, Zara said. You have no status whatsoever among the Callahans. Just get the divorce. I don't consider myself to be beneath Tia. I'm rather good looking too. Thea walked out. She planned to return the Black Dragon card to James. She had overheard their conversation as she opened the door. She could not hold back her tears. Regardless, she suppressed the bitterness in her heart and forced an awkward smile on her tear-stricken face. Ads by Pub Future. James, here's your card. Thank you for everything you've done for me, the care you've shown me, and all you've done for the Callahans. I wish you two the best. She stuffed the card in James' hands. Then, covering her mouth, she ran back into the house in tears. Slam. Before James could explain himself, Thea had turned and slammed the door shut. James put the card away in resignation. Seeing the frustration on James' face, Zara knew that James only had Thea in his heart. She would not have the opportunity to be with him in this lifetime. Hence, she consoled him. James, come back and explain things to her when she's no longer mad. She'll forgive you. She then bent down and collected the pieces of clothing on the floor. She stuffed them into the suitcase and waved goodbye to James, who was still standing by the door. James, thank you for fulfilling my wish. I'm content to have taken a photograph with General Highsmith and the Blythe King. With her suitcase, she turned to leave. James knew he won't be getting back into the house today. He planned to explain things to Thea after settling his scores with the Great Four. Dejected, he left and caught up with Zara. I'll carry the suitcase. He grabbed the suitcase from Zara's hands. Ads by Pub Future. Thank you, Zara said in a gentle voice. The two got on the elevator and went downstairs. Outside the neighborhood by the road, James asked, "Where are you heading?" Zara was disoriented. She came to Kensington mainly for the Blythe King's succession ceremony. She wanted to make a living here. Also, if possible, she wanted to take a photo with the Blythe King and General Highsmith. Now, her wishes had come true. There was no reason for her to stay in Kensington. I'll go home, she said after some thought. James said, weren't you nagging me to help you find a job? What are your skills? I'll see if I can find you a decent job. It was late, and James worried about Zara wandering the streets alone. Even if there was a misunderstanding, she was still Thea's cousin. If anything happened to her, Thea would chew him out after this whole situation died down. Zara said, I majored in economics. After graduation, I worked as the assistant to the chairman of a company. For 3 months, however, I resigned as he clearly wanted to have his way with me. He'd even grope me when we were alone. Upon hearing this, James said, is that so? I just so happen to know the investment manager of the Trade City Center. I'll give her a call. You should work there. Huh? Zara froze. Almost immediately, she exclaimed, ah really? James gave her a slight smile. Immediately, he pulled his phone out and called Scarlett. Where are you? It was almost 9 o'clock. The Trade City Center had only just begun attracting business investment. As Scarlett was an amateur in the field, she had gone on a hiring spree. At the moment, they were having a conference at the company headquarters to discuss the follow-up process of the investment project. She paused the meeting upon receiving James' call. I'm still at the company. Is there anything, James? James said, I have a friend who's currently unemployed. Can you arrange a position for her? Where are you, James? I'll have someone pick you up now. I'm in the middle of a meeting, so I can't leave. No need. I'll take a taxi there. He hung up the phone. Zara was gazing longingly at James. As James hung up his phone, she could not help but ask, James, who did you just call? James gave her a mysterious grin. Let's go. We'll take a taxi to the Trade City Center. Don't tell anyone about this. Keep a low profile, especially in front of Thea. Got it. Zara nodded in excitement. James called a taxi to the Trade City Center. Newly constructed and located in downtown Kensington, its central region was filled with skyscrapers. Ads by Pub Future. The region was comprised of many pedestrian streets, food streets, commercial streets, antique streets, and clothing streets. There were even villas and luxury residential areas in the vicinity. All these combined constituted the trade center of a new era. In the heart of the region stood a skyscraper. It was 180 stories tall, the tallest tower of the trade center, and referred to as the Transgenerational Tower. To the outside world, it was also referred to as the Transgenerational Financial Center. Upon getting off the car, Zara stared at the skyscraper, dazed. James, this is the Transgenerational Center. It'll soon become the most bustling area in the country, where all large conglomerates will gather in the future. They haven't even set up shop yet. Why did you bring me here to look for a job? As she spoke, her expression changed. She gasped, "Wait, are you the owner of the newly established Transgenerational Group and the Transgenerational Financial Center?" James smiled slightly and said nothing. He had bought this new city in secret. However, he had never been here. He gazed at the skyscraper, 180 stories high, and the shining, white words on the top of the tower, Transgenerational Tower. "Let's go." He brought Zara along. After receiving James' call, Scarlett called an end to the meeting, brought the high-ranking officials of Transgenerational Group to the ground floor, and waited patiently for his arrival. A dozen or so men gathered outside the Transgenerational Tower. Ads by Pub Future. These were the elites of society, well-paid business elites who Scarlett had hired from overseas. Soon, the chairman of Transgenerational Group will be here for inspection work. Be careful not to offend him, she reminded. Yes, at present, they were looking forward to meeting the mysterious owner of Transgenerational Group, who purchased an entire city. Who would be that wealthy man with a capital of over $1 trillion? Who in the world would possess such courage and vigor? Soon, they would meet the man who had been the talk on the street. They were both nervous, and a little excited. Then, a man and a woman walked over. The man was dressed in ordinary clothes and had a suitcase in his hands. The woman, though, was rather good-looking. Upon seeing the dozen social elites dressed in professional attire outside the tower, Zara was doubtful. Were they really a Transgenerational Group? "He's here. The chairman is here," Scarlett spoke. "Welcome, Chairman." A booming voice resonated in unison. The dozen or so business elites fixed their gaze on James. Was he the man who bought Transgenerational New City? Meanwhile, Zara was dumbfounded. "Chairman, James was the one who bought Transgenerational New City." Zara was stunned, and her mind went blank. James frowned and glanced at Scarlett. His gaze sent shivers down her spine. She immediately dropped to the floor, her body trembling. The high-ranking officials were baffled. That was Ms. Brooks, the person in charge of Transgenerational Group. Why was she kneeling? For a moment, they were bewildered. James said in a low voice, "What are you doing? Get up." "Yes, James." Scarlett immediately got up and stood by the side, quivering in fear. James went on, "Why are they here? Dismiss them." Scarlett immediately instructed, "What are you standing here for? Get back to work." "Yes." They swiftly left the scene. Soon, only James, Scarlett, and Zara remained outside the Transgenerational Tower. James, I. Ads by Pub Future. Scarlett wore a worried expression. She had only wanted to make James feel welcomed and never expected to offend him. If she had known, she would have come alone. James waved her off. "All right now, I'm not blaming you for this. Just don't repeat it next time. By the way, this is Zara, my cousin. She came to Kensington looking for a job. See to her needs." "Yes." Upon hearing that Zara was James' cousin, she instantly nodded. She approached him and took the suitcase from his hands. "James, allow me." James nodded and ordered, "Assign her a position according to her abilities. I do not want people leeching off the company, nor do I wish to see incompetent people holding high positions just because of their connections." Huh? Scarlett was puzzled. What did he mean by this? What? Still don't get it. James glanced at Scarlett, who had a baffled look on her face. "Don't let her leech off the company just because she's my cousin. She'll be treated the same as all other employees." "Understood." Meanwhile, Zara was still in a daze and had not recollected her senses. Had James been the owner of Transgenerational New City and the brand new Trade Financial Center all along? She found it baffling. Who was James? How wealthy was he? Why would a man who bought the Transgenerational New City marry into the Callahans? Zara. Zara looked at James with an astonished look on her face. Anything, James. Ads by Pub Future. James replied. Do your best at the company. If you run into any problems, ask. If you're competent, you can climb the ranks very easily. You should have a bright future ahead of you here. Zara nodded with a confused look on her face. Remember, don't tell anyone about what you've seen today. Oh, of course. I understand. Zara nodded vigorously. James glanced at Scarlett. Order your men to keep their mouths shut. Inform them of the consequences. Yes. Scarlett nodded obsequiously. Then, I'll take my leave. James turned to leave. He called a taxi and headed to Common Clinic. It seemed like he would be staying at Henry's place tonight. As for the House of Royals, James felt uncomfortable spending the night at such a spacious place. Zara only managed to recollect her senses after James had left. She turned to face the charismatic Scarlett, who was dressed in professional business attire, and introduced herself. Hello, my name is Zara Hills. She smiled. Welcome to Transgenerational Group, Zara. I'm the chairman, Scarlett Brooks. You may call me Ems. Brooks. Ah, it's nice meeting you, Ems. Brooks. Zara was stunned upon hearing Scarlett introduce herself. Even the chairman of Transgenerational Group knelt before James upon seeing him. Who exactly was James? Ems. Hills, follow me. Scarlett gestured for Zara to follow. She was personally bringing her into the company. Ems. Brooks, I can carry the suitcase by myself. Zara immediately took the suitcase from Scarlett's hands. Scarlett smiled and entered the tower. They got on the elevator and arrived at the topmost floor of the building. Ems. Hills, our company's rules and regulations are still in development. We've only partly opened up to business investments, meaning we've only interacted with a few large corporations. Next, we'll improve our corporate system and gradually establish departments. James had instructed me to assign you a position based on your abilities. I believe you've just graduated. Let's see, why don't I place you in the business department? You'll be in charge of business investments in the region near the food streets. What do you think? Though James had instructed her not to give Zara a high position solely because of her connections, she still dared not offer her a position too low. She was James' cousin, after all. To her, Zara was only here to gain experience. Sooner or later, she would be the top brass of the company. I'm in charge of the region near the food street. Zara was stunned. That was a task only a high-ranking official would be assigned. Based on her original plans, she would be content working just any job in Kensington. Even a lower executive position would suffice. Now, she was in charge of an entire region. She had heard that the food street required exceptionally high prerequisites for the entry of business investments. Only renowned catering companies in the culinary world had the right to establish themselves. Besides, the one-off payment for setting up shop was at least a couple of $1 million, not including the subsequent rental they would have to pay. At that moment, she started getting cold feet. Would she be up to the task? However, she was more concerned with James' identity. Ems. Brooks, who exactly is James? Was he the one who bought Transgenerational New City, the world-class financial center of the future? She asked the question that had been bugging her. Scarlett looked at her. You don't know. What do you mean? Ads by Pub Future. Zara was baffled. She was sure it was James who bought this place. Still, she could not believe it and wanted confirmation. Scarlett remained silent. Since James had not said anything about it, she did not dare say much. Seeing that Scarlett remained silent, Zara probed, could James be the Black Dragon General of the Southern Plains? Scarlett smiled and said nothing. Soon, they arrived at the topmost floor of the building. Around 20 people gathered in a grand conference room. They were business elites who had only recently joined Transgenerational Group. Carrying her suitcase, Zara was stunned by the sight of the luxurious conference room. As she had only been the secretary of a company's chairman with a net worth in the tens of millions, she had never witnessed such a spectacle. Allow me to introduce you to your new colleague, Ems. Hills. She'll be in charge of the food street region. Everyone had seen Zara walking in with the behind-the-scenes owner of Transgenerational Group. They stepped forward and extended their greetings. Hello, Ems. Hills. I'll be in your care, Ems. Hills. Aren't you the renowned Mr. Wiggly in financial circles? I know you. You are the famous excellent investor on Wall Street. Ads by Pub Future. Watching the influential people introduce themselves, Zara was so astounded that her mouth was left agape. These were business elites who were renowned in financial circles, and they now gathered at Transgenerational Group. Ahem. Scarlett coughed. They took a seat. Scarlett pointed to an empty seat. Ems. Hills, you may sit there. Yes. Zara took a deep breath to calm herself down. Then, she walked toward the empty seat and sat down. Scarlett continued, I hope you'll keep what you saw today a secret. The identity of the owner is top secret and cannot be revealed to the public. Whoever leaks it will suffer the same fate of the leaders of the Great Four of Kensington. Upon hearing this, everyone in the conference room quivered. Zara was flabbergasted. She was an intelligent woman. Now that Scarlett had mentioned the leaders of the Great Four, she began to connect the dots. James was the person Thea had saved from the fire in the Caden residence 10 years ago. He was also the ghost-masked man who killed the leaders of the Great Four. Now, she finally understood James' affection toward Thea. Thea was his savior. However, his identity remained a mystery. Who exactly was he? Was he the Black Dragon of the Southern Plains? Henry was asleep in a room in Common Clinic. Sensing movement, he immediately got up and switched on the lights. He could see James walking in. James, what brings you here? James looked at Henry dejectedly. I fought with Thea. Huh, what happened? Henry was confused. James deeply sighed. Henry passed him a cigarette. James accepted it. Henry lit the cigarette. James took a deep breath. Nothing much. Just a little misunderstanding. He recounted what happened to Henry. Ha ha ha. Henry could not restrain his laughter. That's hilarious. The general of the Southern Plains driven out of the Callahan residence. Noticing James' grim expression, he instantly held his tongue. With a serious look, he said, James, I can help if you need me to kill someone. But something like this, I'm helpless. James lightly waved him off. I'm not expecting you to help me out. I'll explain things to Thea when she calms down. You'll be sleeping here tonight. Yes, we'll have a good drink while we're at it. They left Common Clinic, and James brought Henry to a barbecue restaurant by the roads. They ordered some lamb kebab and some beer. At the Callahans, Thea was in tears, crying herself to sleep. Ads by Pub Future. She woke up early the next day. Having just taken over Eternality Group, she had to attend to important matters. Besides, she needed to prepare the relevant documents for the application to set up shop at the Trade City Center. The Transgenerational City Center was not open for business investment yet. Even the few large corporations who had set up shop in advance only qualified by a hair's breadth. Meanwhile, smaller businesses would have to wait for the official opening of the investment project to submit their application letters. Thea. Gladys approached Thea the moment she stepped out of her room. Get your divorce with James done as soon as possible. I found you a guy from a rich family. He's young and wealthy. He's definitely worthy of you. If you think I have bad taste, look for one yourself. Brian from the Gormon's a pretty good pick. We'll see. Thea was absent-minded. She wanted to go to the company. But before she went, she needed to go to the Department of Civil Affairs to deal with the divorce proceedings with James. On the way there, she called James. James got dead drunk last night. He was still sleeping when his phone rang. With his eyes closed, he searched for his phone by the bed and answered the call. Who's this? 9 o'clock. In front of the Department of Civil Affairs. Hearing Thea's voice, James was jolted awake. Refreshed, he got up. Thea, beep. Before he could speak, Thea hung up the phone. James sat on the bed in a daze for a few seconds before drop-kicking Henry, who was still asleep. Henry instantly woke up. He rubbed his eyes. What's wrong, James? Ads by Pub Future. Thea wants to meet me in front of the Department of Civil Affairs at 9 o'clock. What should I do? Being put in a difficult position. Henry was at a loss. James, how am I supposed to know? I've never been in a relationship, let alone been married or divorced. Think of something. Quote. Henry wore a perplexed look on his face. Immediately, he said, I'll call Scarlett. She's a woman. She should know what to do. James looked at the time. It was almost 8 o'clock. He kicked Henry. Why are you still dilly-dallying then? Go on, call her. Okay. Henry pulled his phone out and called Scarlett. Scarlett had been busy at work at Transgenerational Group till 3 o'clock in the morning. When she received Henry's call, she had just arrived at the company for the day. Upon hearing Henry recount James' story, she answered that she could not do anything to help. Henry, what do I know? I've never been in a relationship before. There's no way I'd understand matters of marriage and divorce. Both Scarlett and Henry could do nothing. After hanging up the phone, Henry looked at James innocently. James, Scarlett doesn't know what to do either. Then, what should we do now? James was starting to worry. An idea flashed across Henry's mind. He suggested, what if we give the Blythe King a call? We'll ask him to stall for time by putting the divorce proceedings on hold and wait for a few days. Not bad. James brightened up. He immediately called the Blythe King. At present, the Blythe King had important matters to attend to. Upon seeing James call, his face darkened. He answered the phone. With a surly expression, he asked, "What do you want from me so early in the morning, Black Dragon?" James' laugh sounded from the phone. "Nothing much. Just required a little assistance from you. My wife wants a divorce. Could you help me put the divorce proceedings on hold?" "Black Dragon, don't push it." The Blythe King was glaring. He was the Blythe King, general of the western border and commander-in-chief of the 5 armies, yet now, he was being told to play petty tricks over a couple's divorce. "Black Dragon, James, stop screwing around. I'm a busy man, unlike you." James cleared his throat. "Henry, redeploy 100,000 troops from the southern plains. Right on it." Upon hearing them sing the same tune, the Blythe King was so enraged that he wanted to smash his phone. However, he managed to suppress his anger. "You win, James, but can you not call me over such a trivial matter? Just call Daniel. He'll deal with it." "Are you trying to say I can call you if it isn't trivial?" The Blythe King was so irritated that he hung up the phone. After hanging up the phone, he immediately gave his orders. "Daniel, there's something I need you to do for me." Daniel could not believe his ears when he received his orders. Baffled, he left the Blythe King's office. At the same time, in Common Clinic, James was relieved after the call. "Thea, I'd like to see you try. Very impressive of you, Henry. There's no way I'd have thought of such an intricate plan." Henry's face twitched. He was merely at his wit's end. "All right, now, snap out of it. Drive me there. Right on it." Henry recollected himself. The two walked out, and Henry drove James to the Department of Civil Affairs. Ads by Pub Future. Thea was already at the gates. She stood by the door and waited for James. "Isn't that Thea Callahan?" "Yes, that's her. I saw in the news that she just took over as chairman of Eternality." "Why is she in front of the Department of Civil Affairs? Could it be she's getting a divorce?" Thea was renowned in Kensington. With her beauty and charisma, she was recognized immediately by passers-by as she stood outside the Department of Civil Affairs. Thea paid no attention to the fingers pointing at her. She took her phone out and looked at the time. At 9 o'clock, she called James again. With a look of displeasure, she questioned, "What are you doing? Quit your dilly-dallying. Where are you right now?" "Almost there." James hung up the phone. A few minutes later, James appeared before Thea with a bright smile. "Thea." With a surly expression, Thea turned and walked toward the front gate of the Department of Civil Affairs. James pulled her back in time. "What are you doing? Let me go." Thea wrenched herself from his grip. James released her and said with a smile, "Thea, I've looked at the calendar. Today's not an auspicious day for a divorce. Besides, we can't go through with the divorce proceedings today." Thea wore a sad expression. "James, wipe that smirk off your face. Didn't you want the divorce too? You'll get to be with Zara, after all." "Thea, I swear nothing is going on between us. If I'm lying, may the heavens strike me dead." Boom! At that moment, lightning flashed across the sky. Ads by Pub Future. Following that, the sky clouded over. It was about to rain. HMPH. Thea smiled coldly. "James, you better watch your words. You wouldn't want to be struck by lightning, would you?" As James lifted his head and saw the overcast sky, his face darkened. Even the heavens were against him. "Thea, I can explain. Even if you don't trust me, why won't you trust your cousin?" "Because I know her too well," Thea said coldly. "She's always had a thing for military men. I'm not surprised she went after you after finding out you retired from the military. What can I do to gain your trust?" "James, it's too late. Do we have to go through this again? I've given you a chance, but you squandered it." At that moment, a car speeded toward them. A few men got off and entered the Department of Civil Affairs. Upon seeing the Blythe King's men, James sighed in relief. "If so, there's nothing else for me to say. Let's go. He headed toward the building. Thea followed close behind. I'm sorry. We're closed for today. Please come tomorrow. At the gate, James wore a delighted look. Thea, look. Even the heavens are forbidding us from divorcing. Thea was baffled. She watched as people were kicked out of the building. The gates slammed behind them. She glanced at James. She did not think much of it. Tomorrow it is then, she said coldly. After speaking, she turned to leave. James called out, tomorrow's not happening either. However, Thea had already left in a taxi. James rubbed his chin. As long as I'm against this, you'll never get your divorce. What's going on? Wasn't everything fine just now? Today is my and girlfriend's shared birthday. We were planning to get our marriage certificate today. What happened? Many people complained as they left the Department of Civil Affairs. Meanwhile, James was ecstatic. It was a feeling happier than winning a battle. He walked to the roadside and got into Henry's car. Let's go, Henry. Where are you going next, James? The House of Royals or the clinic? James yawned. To the clinic. I need to take a nap. He had drank until very late the previous night and was still a little drowsy. All right. Henry drove to Common Clinic. Unable to get a divorce, Thea headed to the company to continue dealing with company affairs. James slept until noon. Ads by Pub Future. Outside Common Clinic, 9 Dragon Street food stall. James put one foot on a bench and nibbled on a chicken wing. Henry, simply delaying the divorce isn't going to do. You have to help me come up with something. What can I come up with? I'm not a relationship expert either. Henry was depressed. A thought suddenly popped into Henry's mind. Oh right, James, isn't it going to be Lex's 80th birthday soon? How about you do something to make him look good during his birthday party? He will finally acknowledge you if he is pleased. I've heard that Thea prioritizes the opinions of her family the most. Thus, if Lex refuses to let her get a divorce, she'll surely listen to him. James' eyes lit up, and he slammed the table. Great idea. You are the best friend ever. You've solved all my problems. Now, hurry and tell me, how am I going to make Lex happy? The Callahans are very egoistic people. They will surely be pleased to have the Blythe King at Lex's 80th birthday party. When they find out you were the one who invited the Blythe King, they'll definitely look at you with high regard. Henry said enthusiastically. James nodded his head. That does make sense. However, I just want to live peacefully and don't want everyone in the world to know of my identity. Everyone would look at me respectfully and with admiration when I'm outside if word spread. Wouldn't that be counteractive? Well, I can't help with that. Henry shook his head, picked up his chopsticks, and focused on eating. Ads by Pub Future. James continued to think hard about how to boost Lex's ego without revealing his identity as the Black Dragon. I've got an idea. A plan flashed across his mind. I'll use the identity of the Cadence. Huh. Henry glanced at James. Apart from being the Black Dragon, I'm also a member of the Cadence. 10 years ago, the Cadence were the number 1 household in Kensington. There was no such thing as the Great Four in the past. My grandfather had wide connections everywhere, so if I use my identity as a member of the Cadence, the Callahans will surely be pleased. At the same time, I can also reveal to Thea my identity as the ghost masked man that saved her, said James. You have to rethink that plan, James. You are going to be settling your grievances with the Great Four in a few days. Even though it might not be a bloodbath, you'll still end up killing a lot of people. Do you think Thea would still want to be with you if she finds out that there is blood on your hands? Henry dissuaded him. James nodded. True, this won't work, but what else can I do? Henry shook his head. Out of these 2 people, one was the commander of the Southern Plains, who carried 5 stars on his shoulders. The other was a 1-star general of the Southern Plains. These 2 had never panicked in the face of thousands of enemy troops, yet they were in deep water because of Thea. James was willing to do his best for Thea. After lunch, he headed directly to the Clahans' villa. He rang the doorbell. The person who opened the door was Lex's granddaughter, Megan. She immediately crossed her arms when she saw James and said condescendingly, I was wondering who it was. It turns out it's James, the person who lives off the Callahans. What's up? What are you doing here? James came to see Lex and refused to waste time with Megan's nonsense. Is Grandpa home? Yeah, of course. However, don't you know your status? You are just a dog to the Callahans. You'll have to crawl if you want to come inside. Who is it, Megan? Tommy walked over and saw James at the door. Yo, James, what a rare visitor, he sneered. I'm here to see Grandpa. I've got an important matter to discuss with him, said James. Didn't you hear, Megan? You are a dog to the Callahans. You'll have to crawl inside if you want to enter the Callahans' villa, Tommy said condescendingly. Tommy came out to welcome someone, his youngest sister, who moved to North Kensington after marriage had returned. He wanted to welcome her back home personally. Wendy Callahan was Howard's youngest daughter and Megan and Tommy's sister. 6 months ago, she married into a wealthy family in North Kensington whose status was comparable to the Great Four of Kensington. Her husband was also very promising. Despite not being a direct descendant of the Colemans, he was the deputy captain in the specialized police unit and possessed considerable authority. Wendy had brought her husband, the deputy captain of the specialized unit force, back to celebrate Lex's 80th birthday. Ads by Pub Future. Tommy was not expecting the visitor to be James instead of his sister. Suddenly, $1 million luxury car pulled up in front of the villa's gate. A couple got out of the car. The woman dressed in a gorgeous dress seemed to be in her 20s. The man had a beer belly and looked nearly in his 40s. The woman was Wendy. The man was Brody Coleman from the Colemans in North Kensington. He was currently the deputy captain of the specialized police unit in North Kensington. Wendy, Brody. Tommy's expression immediately changed upon seeing the arrival of the couple. He smiled and greeted them. Wendy, I haven't seen you in more than 6 months. Grandpa has been talking about you a lot, Brody. He has been looking forward to seeing you, and you're finally here. I heard you've just been promoted as the deputy captain. Wendy held on to the 40-plus man with a delighted smile. Deputy captain is nothing. The influence of the Colemans is unimaginable. With their connections, my husband will be promoted to the captain of the specialized police unit very soon. We have to stay low profile. I've told you countless times that we have to stay humble outside. Don't go around bragging about being deputy captain. The deputy captain is nothing compared to my uncle. He's the secretary of a particular general in the North Kensington's military region. He is the epitome of authority. Tommy knew that the Colemans were a very influential family, but he never expected them to be so powerful. Come in, Brody. You have me about all the glorious deeds of the Colemans. Tommy invited them into the house. Meanwhile, Megan had already headed inside to inform Lex. Ads by Pub Future. Haha, my good grandson-in-law. I've been looking forward to seeing you, and you've finally come. Lex walked out with a smile. Grandpa, Brody greeted him. Brody, I've heard you've been promoted to deputy captain. Grandpa, you are flattering me. I'm humbled. Deputy captain isn't anything worth mentioning. My uncle is the real deal. He's the secretary of a general in the North Kensington's military region. The Blythe King has high expectations of him. Thus, he was promoted after the Blythe King's succession. He vowed to become one of the best in North Kensington's military region within 5 years. All right. Lex wore a broad smile. Grandpa. James also greeted him. Lex finally noticed James, and his smile froze. Then, his expression dimmed. Yeah, what do you need? Grandpa, there's something I need to discuss with the venue for your 80th birthday. I think the Kensington Hotel isn't worthy of you, James said with a smile. What do you mean, James? Are you saying that Grandpa is not worthy enough for the Kensington Hotel? Are you saying he is not qualified to celebrate his birthday at the Kensington Hotel? Tommy shouted. Get out of here, James. Lex glared at James with dissatisfaction on his face. Who's this, Grandpa? Wendy glanced at James. She got married 6 months ago and had not returned recently. Thus, Wendy had never met James before. Who else could it be? It's the live-in son-in-law of the Callahans, Thea's husband, Megan said contemptuously. James was unbothered by everyone's ridicule and simply approached Lex, whispering something into his ear. What? Lex was stunned, and he exclaimed, Really? After hearing James' words, Lex exclaimed in surprise, and his body trembled. What? This was something that he had never dared to imagine before. Is this real, James? The people gathered at the door were unaware of what happened, and they glanced at Lex, puzzled by his reaction. Grandpa, let's talk over there. James pulled Lex away and reassured him, Grandpa, I swear what I've said is true. I've already made arrangements. You can hold your birthday party at the House of Royals if you'd like, Grandpa. Holding your 80th birthday there will be the first step of the Callahans becoming an influential family when the news spreads throughout Kensington. After a momentary excitement, Lex calmed down. He glanced at James. Do you know what kind of place is the House of Royals, James? It's been built for years, and countless wealthy families have tried to purchase it. Some even wanted to buy it for billions of dollars, but there was no channel to purchase it. Now, you are telling me I can hold my birthday celebration at the House of Royals. Ads by Pub Future. Yes, James wore a very sincere expression. Who do you think you are? Grandpa, I'll be honest with you. I was actually a general in the Southern Plains. However, I made a mistake and had to go to military court. The House of Royals is owned by the commander of the Southern Plains, the Black Dragon. The place was awarded to him, and since the Black Dragon is far away in the Southern Plains. James repeated the same story that he did to Thea again. Although I was expelled from the military and can never return, the commander has been looking out for me. I've already called the commander and got his permission. Why you are a general? Lex's expression changed subtly. He never imagined the live-in son-in-law of the Callahans to be a general. Cough, cough. I violated military law and was taken to court, which got me expelled from the army and kicked out of the military entirely. However, I can assure you, Grandpa, that everything I said is genuine. Why you can really hold your birthday party in the House of Royals. Ads by Pub Future. Initially, James wanted to hold his wedding with Thea at the House of Royals. However, there was a misunderstanding between him and Thea. To prevent getting divorced, he had to approach the prideful Lex. You are a good grandson-in-law. It doesn't matter that you were expelled from the army since you're now a member of the Callahans. We will take care of you in the future. Lex's frown relaxed, and he patted James on the shoulder. Thank you, Grandpa. However, Thea has been clamoring to get a divorce with me for the past 2 days. I've really exhausted all means to beg the commander for this opportunity. He finally agreed to help me this time, seeing that I saved him 8 years ago. Grandpa, could you convince Thea not to get the divorce with me? That won't be a problem. Lex smiled broadly. The House of Royals, the most prosperous and mysterious villa in Kensington. The whole of Kensington would be shocked to hear him holding his birthday party at the House of Royals. Thank you, Grandpa. James smiled. The rest would be easy after convincing Lex. The misunderstanding could be explained slowly as long as they did not get a divorce. However, Grandpa, you can't tell others how you got the chance to celebrate your birthday at the House of Royals. I've got a record and will get in trouble if I attract the attention of relevant authorities. The opportunity to hold your birthday celebration at the House of Royals will also go to waste, James advised. He knew Lex was extremely egoistic and would surely want to show off.